Today we're going to talk about the important concept of money and happiness. And I know a lot of us already think we know the answer to this question, does more money buy us happiness? But oftentimes our actions don't actually align with what we know. Now the first thing to get out of the way is that yes, a certain amount of money is going to make you happier than if you don't have that amount of money. So for example, if you don't have enough money for food and shelter, things like that, you're not going to be as happy as someone who does have access to those things. So yes, a certain amount of money will make you happy. I think the studies say it's around $75,000 a year. I don't remember. Comment down below if you know where that money point is. But okay, let's assume your basic needs are met. So beyond that point, what is money used for? Well, what money is really supposed to be used for is freedom. Money should be a tool that you use to control your time. So imagine the opposite if you don't have money. So then what are you forced to do? You are forced to work at your job every single day without ever missing a day. You can't take sick days because you won't get paid. And even if you have an absolutely horrible boss and horrible working conditions, you can't quit because you're just tied to that money that you need. For example, people that don't have a 6 months emergency fund, no matter what, they can't get fired from their job. And if they do, they got to take the next job, whatever it may be, even if it's worse than their current job. You don't have choice. You don't have freedom in that situation. Now, if you do have some money, then you're in a much better position, aren't you? You can decide whether you want to work somewhere. If your boss sucks, you just quit and go to a different company. You have the freedom to do what you want to an extent. That's what we talk about when we're talking about money buying freedom and choice and time. Now, this seems simple enough, but what happens a lot of times is that people who have money end up building a prison for themselves. Even though they have so much money, they're not able to control their own time. So I always bring up this example because it was so easy to see in Billions. If you remember Axelrod, he was basically able to blackmail that other hedge fund manager, the Indian guy. Because that Indian guy, even though he was making so much money, he did fall on hard times eventually. And his hard times, say, was making $2 million instead of 10 a year. But because of his lifestyle and all his expenses, that was basically like going to zero for him because he didn't know what to do. And they even say this in the show, that hedge fund manager, he has multiple kids in different private schools. He has the country club that he has to be a part of because if he ever gets kicked out, it's going to look really bad in his social circles. And speaking of social circles, he has all these events he has to attend. He has to drive a certain car. All these things that don't seem necessary to people like us that aren't making $10 million a year. But you go over to New York and you see people with tons and tons of money. They're in their own little jails that they created. So in this case, going back to Billions, the Indian guy had to end up doing whatever Axe said, which of course in that show is insider information and all this other hanky-panky. Well, not like hanky-panky, but you know, like illegal stuff. Financial hanky-panky, you could say. So how much freedom did that hedge fund manager have versus someone who's making way less, say $150,000 a year, but lives below his means and, has freedom? If we measure the happiness of those two people, the person making way less money is also way happier. So again, money is to give you freedom to do what you want to do when you want to do it. And this is what my dad always said to me growing up. He said, you want your money to work for you. You don't want to work for your money. And in the situation with the hedge fund manager we just described, he was working for his money. He's a slave to his money. That's actually how my dad described it. Because everyone has to work for money, but you don't want to be a slave to your money because it's supposed to be your tool. You're supposed to use it, not the other way around. And here's another interesting thing to think about when we talk about money buying us freedom. Like I mentioned before, if you don't have enough money, you are forced to work all the time and you don't have much flexibility in your job. But that doesn't always just happen when you're living paycheck to paycheck. And of course, I was reading Morgan Housel's Psychology of Money and he brought this point up. So even if you're making really good money and you're even doing something that you love, if you're forced to do it on a schedule that you don't want to do it on, you're going to end up hating it. And I did not know this in the past. And I don't think a lot of people know this because everyone thinks if you could just find your dream job, you're going to be extremely happy doing it all the time. But the truth is that's not how it works. A great example is this YouTube channel. The way the algorithms work is that you have to keep feeding them on a schedule indefinitely. There are very few creators that can just drop a video whenever they want and things work out. For me, you see me. What's our schedule? Every Tuesday, Thursday, and Sunday, right? I am not allowed to miss that. Because if I do, I'm going to get dinged by the algorithm very hard. And that, honestly, over time made me hate this whole thing. I used to love making videos. Now I like it again, but that's after that took, like a year off? And after taking that year off from making videos, the channel has never been the same in terms of numbers. I'm glad you guys are all still here. You really enjoy this content and I enjoy talking to you. That's why I'm doing it. But my point is that there are jobs that you think you would love, but when you're forced to work on it in a schedule, it starts to suck. And there were many ways that I try to solve it. I try to do different content. I started AK News, if you remember that. But for that, I put myself on a schedule too. I was trying to make 4 sketches a week. And I eventually started hating that too. Because again, you are forced to do it and you don't have control over your time. And this is what people are talking about when they're anti-capitalism. Now, I know you and me laugh at people who say capitalism sucks because it is laughable. Because they'll say it while they're drinking their Starbucks coffee and then they drive away in their car. Both of which were created by capitalism, of course. So it seems very hypocritical. But if you really dissect what these Gen Z and millennial people are saying, is that there are parts of capitalism that they hate. One of the big parts is this working on a schedule like machines. Humans are not machines. But at the same time, companies treat us like we are, and even ourselves, we treat ourselves like we're machines. I'm going to work from 9 to 5 every day, and I'm going to be super productive, and I'm going to increase my productivity, and it's all going to be strict and rigid. Now, does that sound like you have control over your time? You may think that's what you want to do because you want to make more money, you want to have more success, but that's the capitalism trap that they're talking about. Capitalism itself, great. But what it does to our psychology, not so great. And this is something that I've really had to learn over the past year. Because me personally, I am very disciplined. And I used to think that was like my superpower. I could just do something every single day, day in and day out. And it's true, that is a strength. But now I know it has a huge drawback. And it's that happiness factor that we're talking about. If you don't have control over your time, even if you're doing it to yourself because you're disciplined, you're saying, I gotta hit this every day because I wanna hit this point by this time, you're gonna be miserable. And again, all of us, especially those watching this channel, anyone who's type A, you kind of have that mentality. Work, 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 work. Always reaching for the next goal. At a certain point, you realize it's just all kind of stupid. You need money. Yes, you absolutely need money, but how much money do you need? Which is weird to say on a finance channel, I know, but it's the truth. Another thing that has driven me my whole life is financial fear. Fear of not having enough money. That, again, will make you miserable. I bet most of the people watching this channel have that same fear. That's why we all love to talk about risk control, right? Cutting off those tail events. Now again, that's not a bad thing. All I'm saying is that there needs to be a balance. So for me, the thing I've been working on is coming back to that balance because I've gone way too extreme onto the other side, which I guess could happen when you're a finance YouTuber. So I think I mentioned this before, but in my businesses that I run, they took a pretty big hit post-pandemic. And now I'm making about half what I used to make in terms of money that I take home. Now that was obviously a big hit, but the truth is it wasn't that big of a hit financially, it was more of a big hit mentally. Because even at this lower level of earning, I'm fine. But mentally, I was really struggling because of these things that we talked about. Because of financial fear, which is what I'll call it, and also how disciplined I am, and how that discipline works into our capitalistic system that you need to grow your businesses and achieve these certain revenue levels, and of course, how that affected my time. So it's a cocktail to make you miserable. So what I had to realize is that, hey, wait a minute, I work for myself. I have complete control over my time. Why am I putting myself into my own cage? It's stupid. Now, depending on what job you work, you're going to have different levels of how much you could control. But I bet we could all do a better job, which I know is a lot tougher now because everything's virtual, so your work never leaves you. You're always thinking about it. You could always log on to Slack and type a few more messages. It's a trap, though. So for me, I have to come back to this concept of what's the point of money? What's the point of all of this? Just so that you have time to do what you want to do on the schedule that you want to do it. So now, instead of worrying about money all the time and worrying about my businesses and trying to fight an uphill battle, businesses, they go up and down. That's how it works. Money, I have enough to meet my basic needs. So what would I rather do? Well, I realized I'd rather go make more jokes. You guys know I love making jokes. So nowadays, I'm on stage most nights. I spend a lot of my time doing comedy, and it makes me happy. But I'll tell you what, comedy does not make you much money. There's a reason why they call them starving artists. But that's not the point. The point is I already have a certain amount of money, and that should be buying me freedom to go do what I want to do. And doing what I want to do and following my curiosity, not because I need money or because I'm scared of not having it, but because I'm just curious and it's something I love. That I can do on my own schedule, because even with the comedy, I take multiple weeks off because I get sick of it. You're doing so many jokes, you're performing all the time, you're like, I need a little break. So the ability to do that while still pursuing something you like, that's where you're going to be the happiest. So it doesn't have to do do with making more and more money. And I've seen the opposite of this. I've seen friends that are working jobs that they really love, like they're passionate about what they do. And then they get with these other friends that have more money than them. And they see they have a nicer car. And then all of a sudden, this guy over here who loved his job is now unsatisfied because the job doesn't pay him enough to get the same car that his friend has. And then this guy that originally loved his job starts doing things that he doesn't love as much to make more money to keep up with the Joneses. And then he falls into the time trap because he can't control his time, and then he becomes miserable. Don't be one of those people. We all fall into that trap though because we're all influenced by the American idea of capitalism. Not that it's a fully American idea, but let's say our culture to work hard and just keep going. So I would just say it's a good idea to reflect on how much money you actually need and how you could use that money to buy yourself time. Because time to do what you want, whether it's a hobby or spending time with friends and family, that's what's going to make you happy. Now make sure you comment down below with what you think about all of this, because I definitely want to hear it and read the comments. And then click this video right here to go learn about the #1 principle of investing. It's all about tail events and very interesting. Click here and I'll see you in that video.